Cheers, thank you. Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. That's the fanciest table I've ever put water down on. Usually there's a little thing here, but what a fancy table. So I've got quite a lot of stuff that I wanted to tell you in the next 25 minutes. Some consumer insights, thinking about the changes that consumer behaviour is making to the purchase journey, and then finally kind of thinking about what that means to you as a company. So hopefully, three things. There's a lot to get through in 25 minutes, so let's get going. So the first thing to say is that the Internet Advertising Bureau, if you haven't heard of us, we're the not-for-profit trade body for digital advertising in the UK. So it's our job to try to make sure that the ecosystem runs smoothly, that marketeers know what all the acronyms mean and all that sort of stuff. All the services we provide to brands and advertisers are 100% free. So if you don't know us, the best way to get to know us is to go to the site. It's iabuk.net, and there's a whole load of stuff there. You can register, set up a free account, etc. The stuff that I really wanted to think about today was these three questions, and I think on page 9 of your workbook, the questions are there. And if you think about the stuff that I'm saying, and you've got any ideas, you can jot it down on page 9 of the workbook. So the first thing to think about is what has changed about the customer purchase journey. So the first thing to say about that is actually there's a lot of people own a lot of connected devices. Some research that we did with YouGov earlier in the year said that actually on average, the average household has got 7.4 connected devices. And that runs all the way from the sort of one-person household, maybe the older people that maybe have one or two, to the sort of house I live in, where you've got children scrambling for tablets and smartphones, and I dread to think how many connected devices there are, probably sort of 20. But on average, it's 7.4 per household. What are they doing with these devices? Well, we've heard a lot about second screening. So you can see that actually 66% of people say that when they're watching the TV, they've got some other device that they're using as well. The really interesting thing is that actually when we probe this a bit further in a piece of research called RealView, which I'll come back to a bit later on, we found that the biggest combination of devices was actually smartphone and laptop. So if you think about second screening, don't always think about TV plus one, think about maybe laptop plus phone, and how those two can interact together. The other thing that's worth saying is that we're not just living in an online world, we're obviously living in an online-offline world. And traditional media has still got a big role to play. So when we surveyed people, 59% said that actually in the last couple of weeks, I've been prompted by traditional media to pick up my smartphone, to pick up my tablet, and to start investigating either a product or a service or something like that. So it's very much the way that everything fits together. Time spent is a really important measure, and until recently, there have been all sorts of different figures for the amount of time that's spent online. And actually, hopefully, we've put all of those different figures to bed, and we've come up with a single figure that the whole digital industry can agree on. And actually, the average person for the first 6 months of this year spent 2 hours, 51 minutes online per day, which is a combination of obviously desktop, laptop, smartphone, and tablet. And you can see, if you look actually at the pie chart, you can see that the time in a touch-screen environment outweighs the time on laptop, desktop. So you've got an hour and 9 minutes on a smartphone, 26 minutes on a tablet, and an hour and 16 on a desktop, laptop. I think people probably watch about 3 hours, 40 minutes of TV a day. So 2 hours, 50 minutes in a sort of connected environment. You can see the relationship between TV and digital. So that's like quite a few numbers. How many devices have they got? Are they second screening? How much time are people spending, etc.? The really interesting thing about the smartphone in particular is it's such a personal device, people become really, really dependent on it. So in another survey we did, we found that actually 2/3 of smartphone owners said, I would get very anxious if I accidentally left it at home. We worked with a psychologist from the University of East Anglia who said that actually at the university, if someone does badly in an exam, they can cite leaving my mobile at home as a sort of reason for doing badly, and they can kind of get extra marks. So people are so traumatised if they leave their phones at home that they take it into account in terms of exams. What we wanted to do when we found out this figure of 68% was to kind of put it to the test a little bit. So in another piece of work we did, we asked people to try to spend time not looking at their mobile and then to take a little film of themselves on their mobile once they tried to complete the task. And there's nothing like sort of hearing from the horse's mouth in terms of how difficult or challenging that is. So here's a lady talking about the task that she tried to complete. So if you could play the video, please.
I tried about 30 times to do the challenge. It was like some weird physical Tourette's thing that every time I thought, right, I'm going to do this challenge, about 5 minutes later I'd look on Instagram or Facebook or check my email or check the weather or check the news. Literally every time. So I tried to do this task, but I just couldn't do it. There were occasions when I remembered and I read a magazine, and I don't usually do that, so obviously I need to read this, but my smartphone is so entwined in my life that even though I tried out to do this challenge, I failed a million times, which means that I'm far too dependent on this. It's almost like a ritual. It's almost like it's just like smoking, rolling up a cigarette or something. It's just I sit down, have a cup of coffee, and look at it.
So she's very, very dependent on her smartphone. Couldn't complete the task. Kept having to reach for it. What does all that mean for the purchase journey? So we asked people to think about a recent purchase they'd made. They said actually that 78% of the purchases they were thinking of involved a connected device at some stage. Either the research stage where they were comparing brands, either they'd been triggered because they'd seen an ad, or actually they made the purchase itself. We delved a little bit deeper, and as you can see from the chart, what it actually shows is that people do gravitate slightly towards the larger screen with the keyboard when they're getting a connected device involved in the journey. And I think that's purely because of sort of functionality issues. If I'm buying something and I've got credit card details and an address, it is at the moment easier to do that on a device that's got a keyboard. But you can see the increasing role, the larger the screen, more or less, the more likely it is to be involved in the journey. And it's a similar message when we had a look at purchase value. We found that actually the higher the value of the purchase, the more likely a connected device is going to be involved in the journey at some sort. And it kind of makes sense. If I'm buying a washing machine, it's probably more likely that I'm going to do some research online looking at the brands than if I'm maybe buying a chocolate bar or something like that. So you get a sort of sweet spot where high value items, big screens are highly likely to be involved in the purchase journey. So the next chart is a little bit complicated to explain, but I'm going to run with it because I think it makes quite an important point. So let's start with this bit. So what you've got on screen is it's the research phase of the purchase journey. And up the side, you've got the level of device usage, and down the bottom, you've got the item value. And the lines that you can see are actually different demographic groups. So you've got young people in green, then you've got 55 plus, then you've got parents, female, ABC1, etc. So from a research point of view, and this is the researcher in me, when you usually see demographics plotted against a chart, you would expect to see some differences. So old people behave like this, young people like that. The really interesting thing about this chart is that actually all the lines are really, really similar. What it says is that actually it's not demographics that dictates how devices are used, it's the category that people are operating in. So if I'm buying a fridge, I'm going to behave in a really similar way with my device to a much older person, to a much younger person, etc. That's the research phase of the journey. The interesting thing is the trigger point, exposure to advertising, and the purchase itself, the lines again are really, really similar. So this was one of the big things we found from the RealView research, was that actually it's not necessarily demographics that are determining behaviour anymore. It's the category that people are operating in will determine how they behave with their device. I hope that made sense. Sometimes I can make that sound complicated. Sometimes it works okay. Let's hope it was the latter. The final thing to say about the purchase journey is actually the complex nature of the online and offline world. So lots of people will be familiar with looking at something in store, then going online to get the best price, or researching something online and then buying it in store. We found that actually the most common journey was the one at the bottom. 66% of people said that they'd researched a product online. They'd then been in the store because they wanted to get a feel for it, see what it was actually like. And then to make the purchase, they went back online. And it was actually the 55 plus age group who over-indexed on that, which was really interesting. So finally, about the purchase journey, the RealView research that we did, which I mentioned earlier, was a really interesting piece in that we got 20 people to wear cameras for 3 days. The camera took photos every 5 seconds, and then we watched the footage back with them, and we were able to really understand what they were doing. And there are two videos coming up. The first one is a guy talking about the way that he researches stuff, and then he goes in store and the way he uses devices. And the second is a lady who received a message online, and then it made her do something in the offline world. So if you could play the video, please.
There's some stuff that I'll see on like the computer, and then I'll be on the bus or something, and then I'll just be there, I'll have another quick look at it on my phone. Mm-hmm. So I am going from like device to device, looking at the same thing. I'd look at it on the internet, but then I'd go to a shop to have a look.
I went in to just have a quick walk. I wasn't necessarily going to buy anything, but then I'd seen previously that blouse on, I think it was either on there it is. See it? Mm-hmm. Yes. I saw it, thought, yes, it's there. I'd seen that on, it must have been maybe an email or something. I'd seen it with a picture of a woman wearing it. And you can't get that now, it's gone.
So yes, she got the blouse. But the really interesting thing, so we get asked a lot, how does online exposure to advertising affect offline behaviour? And that's a really nice example. She received an email, and then at some stage later, she was just browsing in the store and she went on to make the purchase. So it's affected the purchase journey. What are the implications for my business? The first thing is that actually 69% of people said that visiting a non-optimised site was very frustrating. The thing that's probably more important than that is that actually what they don't do is they don't put the device down, get up their laptop and visit your site again. They visit a competitor site on the device that they're holding. So once you lose them, you've lost them to a competitor. The good news is that in the last audit we did, 84% of the top 250 UK advertisers had a mobile optimized site, which is great. But actually what we've started doing is we've started looking a little bit beyond that, not just is the site optimized, yes or no, but actually what's the quality of the experience that we're offering this new mobile consumer. So we've got some new research which comes out on November the 9th, where we look at people's sites in a bit more detail in terms of the quality of experience that they're providing for people. So I've been allowed to share this with you today on the condition that no one tweets it or anything like that, because if you do, I will get into a lot of trouble. But this is basically our new research coming out on the 9th of November. And what it does is it looks at the top 50 UK advertisers, and we got people to personally visit all of the sites, assess them against the criteria that you've got up on screen, and then give each one a score as to how good the mobile user journey was. So the top 10 advertisers, interestingly enough, there's a lot of retail clients, Harvey's Furniture Store performed best out of all the brands that we tested. Most of them use a mobile site rather than a responsive web design site, which is interesting. And what I wanted to do really quickly was just to pull out a couple of examples. So on the Harvey site, you can see there's some really nice mobile functionality. Immediately, it's using the GPS stuff, identifying the location so you can see where the nearest store is. The slide in the middle shows it's just really easy to sort of swipe through the different products. And then the menu and the search are always visible. So whatever you're doing, it's really easy to get back to the main menu. Another really good example was Very. They had some really nice imagery on the site. The product images, it was very easy to pinch in, have a look at a bit more detail. And they also had the click-to-call functionality enabled. And then finally, really interesting, so this is a non-retail example. This is AXA. So they had a short and concise menu, which is always easy for you to get back to. They had the sticky help banner, so if you got stuck, you always knew how to get back to the banner. And when you were inputting numbers, they had the sort of special, they had the sort of mobile number pad rather than a big sort of up and down scroll. So if you want to see more detail of that, it's November the 9th. It'll be up on the IB site. So finally, this is all, consumers are on mobile. This is what other people are doing. What can I do about it as a business? 4 things that I wanted to leave you with. The first one is to think about the time that people are spending in a mobile environment as an opportunity. One of the things that I always come back to is we're not forcing content on people that don't want to see it. People want to spend time in a mobile environment, whether they are on the bus, on the train, whether they're meeting a friend for coffee and their friend is late. They'll pick up their phone and they'll look for content. And brands and advertisers have got as much right to provide that content as media owners. So don't think of it as, wow, what are we going to do to fulfill all these needs? Think of it as an opportunity. You can define the way that you engage with them through online content. The second one is, even if you think people won't make a purchase, they won't purchase something in your category on their mobile, they will be doing research. So just like the guy we saw in the video, if he was looking at, I don't know, razors or laptops at home on his computer, and then he went on the bus and he continued his journey. If one of those brands was mobile optimized and the other wasn't, he would definitely favor the mobile optimized brand. So even if people don't make the purchase, assume that they will be researching your brand on mobile. The next one is to understand your category. So it's the category that you operate in rather than the demographics of the audience that will determine how people behave. So 3 different examples. I think this is Asda on desktop, Burberry on a tablet, and Braun on a smartphone, all doing sort of very different things at different category values. And then finally, something that I haven't really been able to touch on today, but there's a lot more about it in the Real View research. It's the personal nature of the mobile. So the personal nature of the mobile demands a special approach. It's such a personal device. If I ask for too much information too quickly, then I'm going to alienate the consumer and they're going to step back. The psychologist we worked with described it as walking up the intimacy ladder together, sort of exchanging little bits of information for little rewards. And in this example, I think I've given them my postcode, and in return, they've given me 20% off, which is just a nice, easy exchange of information. So that's actually it. There's a minute to go, which is good, because at one stage I thought I was going to go a long time over. But in that minute, I don't know if you just want to have a think about or talk to the person next to you about those sort of 3 questions that we started with, about the purchase journey, how it's changed, what does it mean for my business, and maybe what steps I should be taking to address that. If anyone's got anything startling, insightful that they want to share with the room, that would be fantastic as well. If you just want to make a few notes and have a chat to your neighbour, that is equally good. But that's it from me, so thank you.